for what's left of the morning. I see we've got quite nice attendance this morning, so thank you so much for taking time out to join us. So I'm going to share my screen shortly, and I just ask if everybody could just mute their mics at this stage, and the same with the cameras. You know, we do have this wonderful innovation of being able to work from home, but as a result, some of the background imagery can be quite distracting to speakers. So we ask that you please switch off your cameras for now. So I just want to, before we even start, I'm going to put up the share my screen so you can just see a couple of house rules. But I'd like to welcome you all this morning. And here we go, PowerPoint. That's it. That's what I'm looking for. Right. So if someone can just throw me that you can actually see this screen, and then I'll keep on going. There we go. Awesome. All right. So welcome everybody to our myth busting debunking session. I'd like to just thank everybody that's been involved in putting this together and sharing and communicating about this to stakeholders, in particular the amazing team at the Innovation Campus, whom I'm sure you've been working with quite a lot in the of late. Saldanha Bay Industrial Development Zone. Hello, colleagues. Also the Saldanha Bay Municipality, AB and his team. Thanks for joining us and thanks for being instrumental in arranging this for us. The Reese team as well. And then of course the DG Murray Trust, whom some of you have worked with in trying to unlock vaccine hesitancy in the districts, and especially with the education projects as well. And then a big thank you to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Moodley, who's going to be probably speaking for the bulk of this engagement. Dr. Moodley is a medical doctor with an M, and he's been a manager of Easter River Hospital, CEO of Victoria Hospital. He's currently the Director of Health Intelligence in the Western Cape, and he's the head of the EVDS system for the Western Cape. Dr. Moodley, amongst other things, when he's not sleeping, and I don't know when he does sleep, he teaches at the varsity at the University of Cape Town, and he's really quite a well-known leader in healthcare, finance, and supply chain management in the health sector. So that's just a little intro to Dr. Moodley. As for me, I'm Lisa Parks. I'm from the Department of Economic Development and Tourism of the Western Cape, and our role really has to be to work with the business sector and the private sector in trying to unlock vaccination capacity, to educate and build awareness in communities, as well as to now try and address vaccine hesitancy and increase uptake. Just a reminder of the web etiquette, and I'm sure you guys can read all of this. Make use of the chat feature, especially if you want to raise questions, and already if you'd like to start posing those questions in the chat box, please do so. And what we'll do once Dr. Moodley gets going with the questions and answer sessions, I'll start grouping those and asking him those questions in batches. Please participate in the polls during the session. We find it's quite a valuable opportunity to get, intel that is current. And then we are going to be recording this and sharing it. If you are wanting to raise questions verbally, please introduce yourself using the chat feature. And you'll see at the bottom of the screen, there's a little indication of how to do that. So it's your name, your organization, and kind of what sector you hail from. And then we'll obviously call on you when the Q&A section is up and running. So just a little bit of background to kind of frame where this discussion comes from. We've been working with health now for a good 18 months, I would say, on looking at how we can support their vaccination program, and in particular through our business network. As you know, since the onset of COVID-19, 3 million South Africans have lost their jobs as a result of the pandemic. We found that women are largely affected, and 1 in 2 of those jobs lost was once held by an informal worker. Nearly 10% of South African businesses have shut down. Over 90% of businesses have reported a turnover that's declined, and productivity declining by 70%. And these are just really broad statistics. We've got much more detailed data on this. But I suppose, as you can see, there's no doubt that there's been a huge impact on people's livelihoods, on the economy. And this is aside from the terrible health impact that we've suffered due to the now 4 waves of COVID. In terms of why vaccination is important for your business, we've really noted that customers will feel more at ease about supporting businesses if they know that vaccination rates are higher, or that the bulk of the staff have been vaccinated. It does improve the productivity of staff, and you'll see that it results in less absenteeism, less stress, obviously the reduced potential of illness and death, and it provides a healthy and safer working environment for your staff, your patrons, your customers, and even your suppliers. And I would urge a lot of you that are working, in particular in the industrial and kind of with big supply chains, that you use your influence to chat to these businesses as well and assist them in their journey to getting their staff vaccinated. Obviously, it helps to avoid future lockdowns. And as we get the percentage of staff, or the percentage of communities vaccinated higher and higher, we are able to weather the impact of COVID better, and then the prospect of lockdowns eventually whittles away. And obviously, once we get our vaccination rates up, particularly in the business sector, it enables us for business to return to what we would call normal and kickstart the economy. In some instances as well, it could give you a competitive edge, especially if you think about promoting your vaccination status. And we're finding in the hospitality industry, hotels, restaurants, and entertainment, even conferencing, they're getting a lot of queries about how safe the space is, what their vaccination rate is, and we're seeing that there are preferential procurement is starting to happen with venues that have a higher vaccination rate. Just in terms of the challenges we're facing for vaccination rollout, and some of you may be aware of some of the more recent data that's coming out. Vaccine hesitancy is a big thing. So people have been vaccinated, and if you look at an innovation adoption curve, you've kind of got your early adopters, and then it kind of peaks up, and then you've got your laggards. And we're sitting in that stage now where we're trying to address the laggards and why people are not getting vaccinated, what the reasoning is, and how we can use emotional and rational levers to try and change that behavior. So there's vaccine hesitancy. So people have just really delayed in deciding whether or not to get vaccinated. Then there's the unmotivated, and people just not gotten around to doing it. Then there's the no vaccine people who say, nope, I'm not going to do it, medical reasons, religious beliefs, or other things like comorbidities. And then there's the bunch where there actually is a need or a want to get vaccinated, but there's a battle in accessing sites and availability. All right, so in the past, the strategy really was to increase the number of accessible sites and our vaccination capacity, and then education and awareness and demand driving to get people there. Now things are starting to move to obviously targeting the areas that have got low uptake and increasing demand. So in line with national strategy, our Department of Health has now got a target of vaccinating 85% of all over 50-year-olds by year end, and 18 to 49-year-olds wanting to get 65% vaccinated before year end. And this is a really tough ask. I think what is of bearing in this conversation is you probably find a large portion of your management team may fall in the over 50 categories, but a large bulk of your workforce will be in that 18 to 49-year-old category. And these are economically active people as well. So it's really critical we get these vaccination rates up in across those age categories. So as I've said before, the approach there has been around promoting equity, creating demand, and then having a targeted approach. In terms of what your options are as an employer, you could use the carrot or the stick. And we may find that conversation gets into this arena, but at this stage, it's going to be around the myth busting. But you can either motivate and encourage your staff with a range of activities for them to get vaccinated, and I'll share some ideas on what that could look like, or go for a mandatory option in terms of your workplace policy. We just make it compulsory. And there's been a lot of media about that at the moment. There's a lot of airtime being spent on it, with nationals starting to talk about this more and looking at it as a potential option. Although no position has been taken by national yet, and the Western Cape obviously has not taken a position on this either. One thing though we're pretty keen on is once you've looked at your vaccination rates within your company and are aware of them, start talking about it. So we've actually got a 100% vaccinated campaign, and it's a a whole lot of collateral where you can posters and buttons and things like that, and you can actually make it public what your vaccination status is as a company and use that as part of your marketing collateral. So you can chat to me about that if you're keen on that. In terms of a vaccine drive, we're very keen on incentivization and using positive affirmation and messaging to drive vaccination uptake. So as an employer, you need to provide education and information. You need to be consistent about the messaging and the importance of COVID vaccination. And we always encourage a positive message rather than a negative one. So not like you're gonna die, you know, it's a healthier workplace, it's your duty of care, it's about safer communities, etc. It's about saving lives and livelihoods. Then obviously you can mobilize team spirit and you can kind of enhance that collective effort and address the rational and emotive concerns of your staff using sessions like this, for instance, myth busting, having vaccine ambassadors, and just having conversations. The other thing is you can offer rewards or incentives, and you'll see a lot of corporates have started doing that. Even national government is doing that with the new 200 Rand voucher for over 50s that get vaccinated. And then, of course, you can help with vaccination access. And this is about giving people time off to go and get vaccinated, or considering having a pop-up site with something at your workplace that makes it easier for people to get vaccinated. I would urge you as well, also look at allowing parents time off to go and get their family vaccinated, especially when it comes to the over 12s. So in terms of what DDAT has been doing, much like Department of Health, we are promoting equity and access. And this is where we're reaching out to corporate sector partners to try and establish big open sites, shutting people to sites, partnering on vaccination days, driving demand within your companies with the myth busting sessions and the workplace ambassador training, and also providing guidelines around mandatory workplace policy and incentives, and then the targeted approach. And this particular engagement is because there is a very low uptake in the Saldanha area, and we are finding that there's also a bit of a spike in case numbers as well. So it's really important that we now pull together to try and drive demand in the area and get people vaccinated. So this is a little bit on just the success, but I won't cover that now because I want you to have as much time as possible with Dr. Moodley. We've spoken about what you can do. There are the Mrna Vaccination weekends as well. There's one, we're in the midst of the Mrna Vaccination week. So I do encourage you to get your staff to go across and use those facilities and get vaccinated, in particular in preparation for the festive season, where in some instances people are on holidays, but in other instances, your workforce are frontline workers, for instance, retailers, and we really encourage them to get themselves covered for this period. So that's it from me. I think at this stage, I'm going to unshare. We'll figure out how to do it. Oh, there we go. And I'm going to hand over to Dr. Moodley to chat to us a little bit and take any questions you may have. Over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Melvin Moodley. I'm a medical doctor working in the Western Cape Department of Health. Lisa has done the introductions. I always feel very squeamish about these things, so I'll leave it as it is, and we can just adjust that there. That's perfect, and we can start our discussion today. So the reason we have these sessions is that we recognize that there's a lot of medical information out in the public domain, and when there's so much medical information, it is difficult to understand or make decisions on it because it feels like it's overwhelming. So what we do is we try and provide you with information so that you can make good choices. Now, before I get into it, and I'm really going to go straight in and say, you know, what questions do you have? So if you have some questions, you can pop it into the chat right now. But I wanted to discuss the process that we follow. So I call it the Mnm process. The first M stands for the method. The method that I use is that I only give you scientific evidence. I will usually tell you where the evidence comes from, and it will be only from high value sources, peer-reviewed journals, the organizations like the World Health Organization or the CDC. So when you get information from me, you can be assured that it's quality information. The second thing is that the second M of the Mnm process is my motive. Why am I doing this? So I'm doing this because I'm a medical professional. I'm not getting paid for this. I'm doing this because I want you to have good information so you can make the best decision for yourself and your family. I want to make sure that you can return as soon as possible to a normal life and that you and your family and your workplace colleagues are as safe as possible. So that's my motivation. When people talk to you, always ask yourself, if they're telling you things, what is their motivation? So with that in mind, I'm going to stop and we're going to go straight into the questions. So usually what I like to do is I like to open it up to the audience. Sometimes the audience is a little bit shy, but that's fine. And I'm going to ask, does anyone have any questions about the COVID-19 vaccines? Go ahead. Oh, I see a question already. I've got a question. So there's a question in the chat. But if you want to put your hand up, then I can call on you and you can actually ask the question. I like a bit of a mix of both. So here's the first question that we have. Is the vaccine safe for pregnant women, especially with a history of a difficult previous pregnancy and or miscarriage? So thank you. That's from Andrea. And I'm going to answer that question. So Andrea, that's question has been asked in almost every session that we've done, and we've done many of this. The simple answer is it is absolutely safe. It is safe in the first trimester, the second trimester, and the third trimester. It is safe for someone who's had a previous difficult pregnancy or a previous miscarriage. As always, I always say that if you have a complicated medical problem, speak to your doctor, but the rule is that it is safe. Now, this is the information from the American College of Gynecologists and Obstetricians. It is also the policy in the Western Cape and in South Africa. Just so you know, we've done a lot of research. Now, in the beginning, we needed to take a little bit more time because it's a little bit more difficult to do studies in pregnant women because one has to be extra cautious. But our research shows that, and this is research published by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and the CDC, that the vaccines do not harm the baby and they do not harm the mother, and they do not cause miscarriages. Now, here's an interesting thing, right? They then looked at COVID-19. So here's the vaccine and here's COVID-19. And they found that pregnant women are at increased risk of death from COVID-19. So there's even more reason for a pregnant woman to be vaccinated. A pregnant woman compared to a woman of the same age that's not pregnant is at more risk of dying from COVID-19. So we strongly recommend that if you're pregnant, if you're breastfeeding, that you please get yourself vaccinated. Now, the second part, it follows on, and then I'm going to go to Khomotso, is does the vaccine make you infertile? Does it make you sterile, whether you're male or whether you're female? The answer to that is that it does not make you sterile. It does not make you infertile. I don't know, we not sure, we know where some of the rumors came from, and we don't blame people for asking these sort of questions. But there's no evidence that it makes you infertile. In fact, many people who've had COVID-19 have gotten pregnant and have had children because we've been through this for almost 2 years now. And the evidence is quite clear. It does not cause infertility and it does not make you sterile. Now I'm going to stop there. I can see, I love the questions that are coming, but I'm going to give Khomotso a chance. So Khomotso, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Thank you, Doctor. I think that was my second question that you have already answered. You see, the greater thing that is getting us fearful is that they are talking about something inside the vaccine that is tampering with one's DNA. How true is that statement?
Also a good question. Now you see, and so Khomotso, I'll answer your question. Thank you so much. So the answer is no. There is nothing, and this is a common question that gets asked again. And again, we don't know where this comes from, right? But the question is, does the vaccine affect your DNA? The answer is absolutely not. It does not affect your DNA at all. Now, in terms of the vaccines, we've got two vaccines that we use in South Africa, the Johnson & Johnson and the Pfizer. The Pfizer is called an mRNA vaccine. It stands for messenger RNA. It sounds a little bit like DNA, but DNA is DNA and RNA is RNA. Your DNA is in your cell inside a separate structure called the nucleus. It is far away. When the vaccine goes into your cell, M stands for messenger. It sends a message to a part of your cell that's up in the corner, and it tells your cell to develop some a spike, and your body creates antibodies to the spike. It does not touch your DNA at all. It does not affect your DNA. In fact, the mRNA vaccine doesn't have any part of the virus in it. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine has a tiny piece of vaccine, virus material, but it's not enough for the virus to develop. So the Johnson & Johnson has a tiny piece. The Pfizer vaccine does not have any any part of the virus in it. It simply has a message that it sends to your cell. Okay, thank you so much for that question. So just to confirm, it does not affect your DNA. Now I'm going to the chat, and then if anyone else has a question, please put your hand up. What are your thoughts on taking both J&J and Pfizer? That's an interesting question. It's a very scientific question. So in the United States, in South Africa, at the moment, health workers are getting Johnson & Johnson boosters. So if you've had a Johnson & Johnson, you can get a Johnson & Johnson. We have just seen yesterday, so these things are happening on, you're getting like hot off the press information. SAPRA has approved boosters for everyone over 18. So if you've had 2 Pfizers, you can have another Pfizer 6 months after your second shot, right? So SAPRA has approved that. In the United States, they do allow boosters. They allow mix and match boosters. So if you've had Johnson & Johnson, you can have a Pfizer or a Moderna booster. If you've had Pfizer, you can have a Johnson & Johnson booster. The data shows that both are quite effective in South Africa, and they generate quite a good immune response. Both are good. And in America, they give you a choice. We don't give a choice in South Africa yet, but I think the policy that South Africa has is fine for now. That might be able to adjust as we go in. So thank you for that question. Phumzile, I see your hand is up. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. I wish you can have a pen because I've got a series of questions which I want to put forward. My name is...
Can we take 2 for now, Phumzile? Can we take 2 questions and then we'll go with right? Yeah.
No problem. My name is Phumzile Stofile. I'm the leader of the chaplaincy, provincial chaplaincy in the Western Cape. And I'm going to ask you a question that has been coming over and over in our consultations with the religious leaders and the religious community. One of those questions is the adverse reaction on deaths resulting from vaccination. There seems to be a lack of transparency in that respect. There's no convincing information that is coming forth with regard to that information. I've personally made a bit of reading. There's one doctor overseas who actually informed people of this, but then it backfired on her, where people lost more trust on vaccines. I'm not sure whether that is the fear of not coming forth and being transparent about that, but I'd want to hear your comment on that. That's one question. Okay, then there's this.
Let me do this question, and then Phumzile, I'm going to ask you for your second question, right? So the audience can follow us nicely.
Sure.
So the answer, Phumzile, I'm actually wondering whether I should go straight to the internet and show you that this information that you're talking about is available. So the question you ask is there any investigation and any information on deaths following vaccines, right? And I'm going to try and pick it up. There we go. It's on my screen right now, right? I'm just checking if it's got the numbers here. Right. So I'm going to share my screen, and it took me all of 2 minutes, but I appreciate that sometimes it's difficult to know where the information is. So I'm just looking for share screen. There we go, share screen. And that's SAPRA. Okay. And I'm going to share. So the question that is asked, and you should be able to see my screen now, is is there any information on deaths from COVID vaccines? The answer is yes, and we do make that information available. So the organization is called the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. They approve all medications and they investigate any side effects from the COVID-19 vaccine. So if there is a death after a person has taken a vaccine, they investigate it and they look into whether they died from the vaccine or there was another reason for the death. Now, I'm going to explain what that means in a second. But this report says, to date, there have been 32 death cases that have been completed to look whether it was the vaccine that caused the death or whether there was another cause. Of those investigations, 28 of them, they found that the vaccine did not cause the death, that they died for another reason. 4 cases they could not fully investigate because the family would not allow them to complete the investigation. They said, we don't want a post-mortem, we've lost too much, right? So this information, Phumzile, is available at the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority website. And in fact, in all countries, or most countries, certainly in the US, I'm going to stop the share, certainly in the United States and the United Kingdom, they have systems for monitoring adverse events following a vaccination. Now it deals with, thank you, and Lisa has put in the link so you can see the document for yourself. Now you've brought about an interesting question because I've heard it a lot of times as well. People want to know, have there been many deaths? Have we had we hear, I've heard someone say, oh, there's thousands of people that have died. Now the answer is that's not true. Now, to date, we have given billions of vaccines across the world. I'll later on tell you the exact number, but we've given billions of vaccines across the world. We have been given vaccinations since January this year, all the way through. Now, some people may, because they are old or for various other reasons, die in that time. The question we always have to ask is, did they die from the vaccine or did they die from something else? So I've been vaccinated, but if something happens to me now, I'm hit by a car, did I die from the vaccine or did I die because I was hit by a car? So we investigate that, and Phumzile, there have been 0 deaths in South Africa that have been caused by the vaccine. I've got another study from Israel where they looked at 2.5 million people, and again, who received the Pfizer, and 0 deaths caused by that. So there are no deaths recorded in South Africa that have been caused by the vaccine. Now, Phumzile, I'm going to let you talk to ask your second question, because you did say you had a lot of questions. Now, here's a question from Grant. J&J vaccine is registered on SAPRA. Why is Pfizer not registered? Right? How is management supposed to mandate a Section 21 approved product that is not on the registered health products database with SAPRA yet? So, Grant, the answer is there is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and the Pfizer vaccines have both been given what we call emergency use authorization by SAPRA, and that allows the health departments to give, to use the vaccination as part of a medical rollout program. Now we're getting into quite technical things, but I will also say that in the United States, the Pfizer vaccine has been fully approved for utilization, and that is not only an emergency use authorization, it is a full utilization. And there are other countries that have also granted Pfizer full utilization. I'm not familiar about Mrna. I'll have to go in and check up about Mrna for full utilization. Phumzile, would you like to ask your next question? And then I'll go to Grant, who has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Doc. My second question is slightly related to my first question, but this one is based on the mistrust regarding statistical reports on deaths and COVID-19 infections. There's always this missing link between the COVID-19 infections and the resultant deaths. There is a terminology that you doctors are using to define that gap. I forgot the name of this number that, and that causes a bit of mistrust, For an example, during the elections, people are asking, where was COVID-19 during the elections campaigns and so on? Because we had nothing about the high rate of infections while people were in big crowds in the stadiums and so on, while the politicians were campaigning. Now that the elections are gone, we are all of a sudden hearing about the high rate of infections and so on. So can you comment on that as to what happened during those big crowds filling the stadiums? Because this has to do with the church closure, where churches are closed, you know, and people are saying stadiums were filled to capacity, but in church are closed. Why is there that discrepancy in terms of that, and also the deaths and stuff like that? So that is the issue of that leads to mistrust regarding the statistical reports. So your comment, please, talk on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Phumzile. So Phumzile, I'm not going to comment on the government's decision with regards to gatherings during the election. I think that's a government policy decision. What I will comment on is that the COVID infections go through waves. Let me show you, right? And I'm going to show you on a diagram now. Let's use this one. I wonder if I can see all the waves here. Yeah. So this might be possibly there's it here. Let's use the countrywide one, right? I'm going to share my screen with you in a second. And I'm going to explain that the COVID infections go through waves. Sorry, I just need to share my screen. Right. Now, I can't remember exactly when the election was, so you will have to forgive me. But here we have wave 1, wave 2, and wave 3. Then you have in between the waves what we call the interwave period, where the number of infections drop dramatically and the spread of COVID-19 decreases in the community. So there are times when the spread decreases. Then, of course, there are times when the spread rapidly increases. And my understanding of government policy is they look at how significant the spread is before introducing restrictions. But Phumzile, it's not my place to comment on government policy in terms of their decisions, in terms of policies, in terms of gatherings. What I can say is that the number of cases do go up and down in waves. The second thing is, I disagree with you that there's anything unclear about the statistics. The statistics are published and easy to access, but I do agree that sometimes it's difficult to find the statistics, which is why we're going to make it available to you. But as I've said, we investigate the deaths. Now, if there are no deaths, we can't, find deaths, right? Vaccinations are done openly. You can go to a mall and you can see that in Canal Walk, people are giving vaccinations. And we'll talk a little bit about side effects because there are side effects, and we'll give you statistics on side effects. But we don't, you're dealing with an entire medical fraternity here, 35,000 people in the Western Cape itself. And there's no attempt to lie to the public. There's no value in it, because we are as much affected by COVID-19 as everyone else. And of course, many of our members want to go to church, to mosque, to temple, to synagogue. And we want to get things going as close to normal as possible. So Phumzile, I'm going to now move, and I see we do have other questions. So I'm going to check with Grant. Grant, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Doctor. On the two questions. Firstly, on the same one. From a management or a director perspective, it is a problem, because if you go onto the SARPRA database and you actually check, only the J&J shows up as a registered medical product, right? Not the Pfizer, right? I've also asked the legal opinion on that, and it's a bit iffy at the moment, right? So with all the talk of mandates and things like that, it is a bit of a concern that Pfizer is not yet a fully registered medical product. And I would like to know, what is the delay? What did J&J do differently to Pfizer that J&J feels confident and Pfizer does not feel that confident to register the product with SARPRA yet? Because it is, I think it is important from a confidence perspective. Section 21 has a lot of conditions that needs to be met for Section 21. I'm of the opinion not all those conditions are currently being met, but that put aside, how do I address that with staff because they can easily access this database and come back to me and say, well, Pfizer is not registered. And then the second question quickly is, why is there no inactivated virus vaccines available in South Africa yet? With our other company branches and things where an inactivated viral vaccine has been available, the uptake has been more positive because it's something people know, people feel more comfortable with, because you can say it is an inactive or a dead virus that is being injected into you, or etc. A lot of people do not like the idea of your cells being hijacked to make the protein, the spike protein. So why is there this reluctance in South Africa to make that type of vaccine available? I know that there is one that is approved, but it's not available to the public yet. So I would like to understand that.
Okay. So Grant, thank you for your question. There are a few inaccuracies in your statement. So the Pfizer vaccine is registered in South Africa. And what I will do to make it easy for you is I will go to the website and I will pull the information and I will make it available for you. Now, different countries have different ways of registering and different processes for registering, but the two vaccines that are allowed for utilization and registered for use in South Africa are the Johnson & Johnson and the Pfizer vaccine. So let's be categorical about that, right? The second thing is that there was a statement that was made about why isn't it why aren't vaccines available for full utilization or fully approved? Because many of the vaccines were approved for emergency use authorization, and the United States has granted full utilization of Pfizer. The next thing I will say is you use the term hijack, and that's a bit of a negative term. And I'm not going to get into a debate about this, one way or the other, but the vaccines have all been tested and have all been found to be incredibly safe. The mRNA vaccine uses a new mechanism to assist with immunity, and I will take the group through that. The last statement you made, it escapes me now, but I'll get to that in a few minutes' time. Okay, now I'm going to go to some other questions. I'm going to go with, okay. We have over 94% recovery rate. Did anyone investigate how are these people recovering? And the answer is, you must understand that many people, and that question comes from, if we have over 94% recovery rate, why is that? Okay. So, and is there a Chinese vaccine? Oh, yes, you asked a question about the inactivated vaccines. So, the first thing is that we have two very effective vaccines in South Africa. And if there are more companies that apply for licensing, then they will be looked at by SAHPRA. And if SAHPRA is happy with this, then they will authorize or register the vaccines. That's to answer your question. I know that the Sinovac has made applications to the SAHPRA, and I assume we're waiting for the outcome of that. Let's then go to, so to answer the question, why is there a 94% recovery rate? So the thing about having a high percentage recovery rate, and I can't confirm if it's 94% or not, is that even though a lot of people recover, a lot of people also die. So I'm going to give you the statistic now, and I'm going to just check. I'm not sharing my screen, so I'm just going to press escape. Lisa, can you confirm that my screen is not being shared?
Yeah, we can't see your screen yet.
Okay, good. So I'm just going to give the person who asked that question, if we have such a high recovery rate. So at the moment, we have had over 5 million people die from COVID-19. In the United States, more than 1,500 people are dying every day from COVID-19. In South Africa alone, we have lost in excess of 260,000 people. Just yesterday, I was speaking to my brother, and we have a relative, two relatives. They were in their late 50s, and they both passed away. So I'm sure we've all been touched by COVID-19 in some way. Now, I know there's a second part to your question about the vaccine being forced, and I want to stay away. My job here today is to give you medical information. So you are right that a lot of people do recover. My family members have had COVID-19 and they've recovered. But the vaccination, and I've had the vaccination, is there to make sure that we don't lose the hundreds of thousands of people and more that will continue to die if we do not vaccinate and if we do not optimize our treatment. The other thing about being unvaccinated is that if you have a large pool of unvaccinated people, it is most likely that the variants develop there. And if the variants develop there, then what happens is we may get a variant that isn't as, that has a much lower recovery rate, that has a recovery rate similar to Ebola, and then all of us are at risk. And that's why we need to all act together to try and reduce the effect of the COVID-19. So I'm going to take one more question, and then I'm going to go to a few more common questions that we get, right? So there's a question from Zeniela. Kindly advise how the vaccine affects our immune system. Is it true that the vaccine does the fighting for you once you have COVID and overrules your natural immunity? Now that's a great question. And it's tied a little bit to some of the questions we've had about the immune system. So let's answer a few questions about the immune system. If you have a COVID-19 infection, right, you do develop what we call natural immunity. So anyone who's had COVID-19 does develop some natural immunity. The only problem is that it's dangerous, right? Because you don't know whether you'll die from COVID-19 or not. So COVID-19, and it's not just death, it's death, it's long COVID, side effects, it's hospitalization, etc. So that's the first thing. If you get the vaccine, you also develop immunity. Now, the question is, how does it help you develop immunity? So the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a vaccine that contains a tiny piece of the COVID-19 virus, a tiny fragment. If you think about it, it's less than the tip of my fingernail, if you consider the whole virus being me. The virus can't replicate. So if you get the vaccine, you don't test positive for COVID-19. It goes into your body, it goes into your cell, doesn't touch your DNA, and your body forms antibodies to it, right? And so why we like vaccines is because when you get the virus, when you get COVID-19, you've been exposed to the full dangers of COVID-19. When you get the vaccine, it's training your body to recognize the COVID-19 virus. So when you get it, your body forms antibodies. It also forms memory cells, so that in the future, if you actually get COVID-19, you're protected. It does not weaken your immune system. In fact, it strengthens your immune system. Now, these are all common questions that we get, but it's important to answer these questions categorically. Now, it does not overrule your natural immunity. It assists your natural immunity, okay? Now, people have asked, well, does it knock out my immune system? The answer is no. It does not knock out your immune system. We've been giving vaccines for hundreds of years, right? The COVID vaccine, the different vaccines have slightly different mechanisms, but ultimately they do the same thing. They teach your body to build antibodies, and they teach your body to learn about COVID-19, so that if you get COVID-19, you can fight it better. It's sort of like doing training, but learning slowly rather than being asked to lift a very heavy weight. Some people have also asked, do I have long-term, are there long-term side effects from the vaccines? So the answer is, we've now been giving vaccines for all of this year, and we've been giving vaccines for hundreds of years. Our research shows, and it's extensive research, that the side effects from vaccines at most occur up to 6 weeks afterwards, and not beyond that, right? And so there are no long-term side effects. Now, the mRNA vaccine is a new vaccine, so I'll give you that. But the mechanism, it uses your cell to produce the spike protein, But that part of the cell is not part of your immune system. That's part of your normal protein mechanisms in your cell. So that's not part of your immune system. It's actually part of your protein manufacturing part of your cell. And our cells manufacture proteins all the time. Now, I understand that's a bit of a complicated explanation, but I think it's important to understand a few basics. Number one, if you get the virus, you will get natural immunity. If you take the vaccine, you will get immunity as well. It's safer to take the vaccine, right? Number two, the vaccine does not damage your immune system, it strengthens your immune system. And number three, long-term, the evidence, our evidence shows that it doesn't have our evidence shows that there's no evidence that it has long-term side effects. And our evidence shows that if it has an effect, it will usually be in the first 6 weeks of taking the vaccine. And that's what we've found. Now, I'll add in one more, because in earlier, it's a very nice question that you asked. And the one more thing is, does the, what's better, natural immunity or vaccine immunity? So it's a very scientific question, but there's no doubt you get some immunity from being infected, and you do get some immunity from being vaccinated. I have read one scientific paper in the New England Journal of Medicine that showed that vaccine-induced immunity was slightly better. But overall, I think it's safe to say that both give you immunity. What we do know categorically is if you've been infected and you take a vaccine afterwards, and you're allowed to take a vaccine 30 days after, that categorically gives you even better immunity. So if you take the vaccine and if you get infected and you take the vaccine, it gives you the best possible immunity. And I think that's the main point I want to make. And I think we've covered quite a few of those questions. So I'm looking through, you have some sound trouble. Are you allowed to travel if you're unvaccinated? It depends on which country you're traveling to, and different countries have different rules about traveling. And as many of you may have realized with Omicron, the traveling rules have changed. The traveling rules are always changing, and you are advised to check with local people. I'm looking through.
Wendy, can you answer the question around side effects?
Yeah, okay.
Kind of side
And
effects
I'm watching the time now. We do need to move along. I'm just checking. Okay. All right. So let's talk about side effects. Thanks, Lisa, because that is an important question. And then there's a question of the rate of protection of the vaccine. So let's answer the side effects. So most people will, let me think about how to put it. Okay. If you take the vaccine, some common side effects that you might feel, and not everyone gets these side effects, is a little bit of arm pain, right? You may feel that after you get your vaccine, a few hours later, your arm is a little bit sore. This is usually the vaccine, your body mounting that immune response to the vaccine. That's the first thing. Then some of the more minor side effects that you get, and again, not everyone gets it. In fact, the minority of people get it, will be a headache, a bit of chills. You may feel tired, and you may feel a little bit fluish. In most cases, that lasts a day, sometimes 2 days, and very occasionally 3 days. Thereafter, things are completely fine. Now, I do need to say that we are aware that some people are afraid of needles, and that's fine. In fact, the studies have shown that up to 10% of people are afraid of needles. I do need to stress that the needle that they use is very small. When I got my vaccine, and I have been vaccinated, I turned away and I clenched my teeth, and it was over in a few seconds. Now, that's the vast majority of people, and all our studies, the studies done by Discovery, international studies, show that you do get these minor side effects, and not everyone gets these minor side effects. Now, it's important to understand that you mustn't confuse these minor side effects with something is wrong. This is your body mounting an immune response, and it is important to understand that. Now, it's also important to understand that there are some rare side effects, but serious side effects. Now, many of you would have heard about the clotting that you get from the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So to understand, there is a rare case of clotting that you can get from Johnson & Johnson. I'm not going to give you the term now, but just to give you a sense of how rare it is, they did a study on 7.9 million people and they found 17 cases of it. So that's 0.000 something percent. It's very, very rare. But I did inform you that I will give you the full information. And this was a study published by the CDC. Now, this clotting, we've in the Western Cape alone, we've given over 4 million vaccines. And I can't think of the exact figure that we've given in South Africa, but we've given well over 10 million vaccines. We have had 2 cases of the clotting abnormality for the Johnson & Johnson, and both patients have made a full recovery. So you do get these serious side effects, but they're very rare. With the Pfizer vaccine, the thing that we get is there's a series of different side effects that we get, but the one I would like to mention is something called the myocarditis, which is an inflammation of your heart muscle. And that occurs, they did a study and it's published in the New England Journal of Medicine, 2.5 million people, and they found that just over 2 people per 100,000 got this very rare side effect. And no one died. The vast majority of people recovered comfortably. A few people needed to be hospitalized from that side effect. Now, I want you to think about, now I'm mentioning these side effects because they're real, but I do want you to understand that these side effects are rare, right? Now, when you look at it, when you try to make the decision for yourself about whether you take the vaccine or not, I do want you to think about the following, right? In that 7.9 million people, if none of them had been vaccinated, I think we had about 40,000 that would have died from COVID-19. So your risk of dying from COVID-19 is so much higher if you're not vaccinated than if you're vaccinated. And all the side effects that I mentioned, the myocarditis, the feeling unwell, all those side effects are actually much more common if you have COVID-19 than if you get the vaccine. So it's just something to think about if you, as you make your decision about taking it. I've got a quick one from Pumzile. What is the safety and efficacy of vaccines on children? Exceedingly safe. Children have even fewer side effects, and children have wonderful immune responses, so they do really well with COVID-19. But just to let you know that we are not giving, when I say children, I mean 5 to 11-year-olds, and the data has been published. They get given a lower dose, and it's in the US that they're giving it. There are other countries that are giving it to children. In South Africa, we're not giving it to children, but the data shows that it's very effective in 12 to 11-year-olds, and it's very safe. So it's safe in any age category. Maybe, is it safe to get infected with COVID while infected with COVID? Lisa, with your permission, I'm going to go until 11:05 because I've got some interesting questions here, and I want to try and get to them, right? Yeah. Is it safe to get the vaccine while infected? So what we say to people is we don't advise getting vaccinated while you're actively infected. And we ask that you wait for 30 days post-infection to get vaccinated. This differs from country to country, and the United States asks you to get vaccinated 90 days post-infection. So if you have a confirmed infection, you do need to tell your vaccinator, and we do advise waiting 30 days post-infection. This is to allow your system some time to recover. I'm going to now check, and I'm going to, I promise, please put your questions into the chat, and I'm happy to answer all your questions individually and come back with some of the research, especially on the registration of vaccines. I'm very quickly going to talk about percentage rate, and then I'm going to talk about, gosh, the questions are really coming in. I'm just checking all unanswered questions. Okay, here's a very important one. Can someone vaccinate while having a comorbidity? Now, that's an interesting one because we've recently, in my talks, people have asked me this question. If I'm diabetic, can I get the COVID vaccine? If I'm uncontrolled diabetic, can I get it? If I have cancer if I have these medical conditions? So the answer is yes. And in fact, we actually want people who have comorbidities to get the vaccine. The reason is people who have comorbidities are at greater risk of dying from COVID-19 than people without comorbidities. So people say, well, I'm worried if I'm diabetic, the vaccine will have more effects. No, it doesn't. So our recommendation is that if you have a comorbidity, if you're older, if you have any condition that affects your immunity, you should absolutely be vaccinated. In fact, there are certain conditions where we give you an extra dose. So if you are on dialysis, we give you an extra dose. If you've had a transplant and you're on immunosuppressives, we give you an extra dose. So we do strongly recommend that people get vaccinated. If they have an immune system, if they are immunocompromised. I'm just checking if there's something quick I can do. Okay, I'm going to see if there's, some of these questions are very complicated answers. I'll do my best to answer afterwards. I'm just going to check. Oh, someone asked the question, how well does the vaccine work? The answer is, it depends. It's a difficult one to answer because we've got a new virus that's out, or a new variant that's out. Certainly in the studies that we had, the vaccine was very effective. The Pfizer vaccine, in a study in the New England Journal of Medicine, was very effective after 2 doses. It prevented infection by about 88% and prevented severe illness and death by over 95%. Now, the thing about the vaccines, especially because of the variants, is that over time they have been less effective at preventing you from getting COVID-19. So they are still effective, but there are people who are vaccinated that will get COVID-19. But where the vaccine is very good is that it protects you against severe illness and death. Now, with Omicron coming out, we've already got data that shows that people who have been previously infected can still get it quite easily. We're still waiting for the data on people who've been vaccinated. But the question is whether that previous infection or vaccination protects you against hospitalization and death. I'm going to end with the last set of slides, but I do note that there have been hands, and unfortunately we've run out of time. But please put your questions in the chat group, and I'm always happy to answer it. And I'm just going to check if I have, I will want to answer this question on religion before I go to the final slides. So all religious organizations, the leadership, have endorsed vaccines. The Roman Catholic Church, the Jewish community, the South African Council of Churches, the Muslim Judicial Council, the Islamic Medical Association. The Vatican is giving vaccines. They're giving the Pfizer vaccines. The Anglican Church supports vaccines, partly because of what Phumzile says. They want their congregations to be protected, and they want to get back to normal functioning. I am aware that there are certain small subsections in religious groups across the spectrum that, that are unhappy about vaccinations. Again, I'm not a theologian, I haven't studied theology, but I can comfortably say to you that I've checked and all the religious organizations support it. And if you want to go for pilgrimage, you have to be vaccinated if you're Muslim. So I wanted to cover that question. So my final one, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you some information, right? And the thing I want to stress is that we must always counter, if anyone asks us a question, it is always important to counter with facts, right? And here we have some facts that I'm going to show you now. So in this, I'm going to give you a, oh, sorry, Lisa, you can see my screen. Some people always like to know what the ingredients of a vaccine are. I'm going to give you the facts and you can see the ingredients for yourself. Some people want to know how many people have died from COVID-19. I will put the information up there. And I want you to know that we've given almost 8 billion doses of the vaccine. But I think these are the important slides. Why should you get vaccinated? And this is the question, right? Why should you get vaccinated? Why should your relatives get vaccinated? Well, the answer is, if you are not vaccinated, not fully vaccinated, a study in the US, you have an 11 times greater chance of being hospitalized. You have a 10 times greater chance of dying, right? if you look at this graph, this is slightly old, but the information is still valid. If you look at it, and we looked in the Western Cape, and we found that the majority of people who were admitted were unvaccinated. That's the dark red. The green are the fully vaccinated. The majority of deaths were unvaccinated. And so it is quite clear that being vaccinated protects you. It protects you, it protects your family, it protects your co-workers, right? We did a study and we found that for every 100 deaths caused by COVID-19, 70 would have been prevented if you were fully vaccinated. And these are our friends and our family members, right? For every 100 admissions among COVID-19 cases, 64 would have been prevented by being fully vaccinated. So you would have prevented admissions as well. Now, when I speak, I don't just speak for myself. I speak for the entire medical fraternity, or I would say the vast majority. There will always be a few people who have a slightly differing opinion, right? But when I speak for more than 99.99% of the medical fraternity, and I speak for the medical fraternity over hundreds of years, right? The last thing I will say is that we do have an effective treatment that can protect you and allow us to get back to a normal way of life, and that is a vaccination. There are other treatments that are coming up, and I hope that they come up as soon as possible so that you are protected and that you can take care of yourself and your family. And the last thing is, I hope that this has been informative. I will try and answer the questions offline and send it to you. And for those, for the question on registration, I will get the research and send it to everyone so that you can see. And I think we'll stop there, and I will thank you for your time. And I hope this has been of value to you. Over to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Dr. Moodley, and thanks to everyone who's joined us. So I'm going to do a quick wrap up once we've just heard a quick 2-minute cameo from Mrna. Mrna works for EMS, and they have got a Vaccinated that has been dedicated to the Saldanha area. So I just thought if she could just have 2 words with you guys, and we're really looking to see if there's an expression of interest from anybody in the audience today or other corporates and private stakeholders to have the Vaccinated come to your premises. So Mrna, over to you if you're still on the line. Mute her. Basically, the ask is, are you interested? There is a poll. You can mark your interest in that poll. Lastly, I just want to say thanks to everybody that has attended today. Just be reminded of our ask. It's really to help us increase vaccinations, make your workplaces safe, and ultimately save lives and livelihoods. I'd encourage you to do the poll. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.